Hello everyone, welcome back to a very special episode of Men's Health Friday Sessions. I'm Dr. Drew Ramsey. We're going to be joined by just a amazing DJ, human, mental health advocate, Zane Lowe. There he is. So I had a little walk-on music for you there, Zane. Welcome to Friday Sessions, when we talk about male mental health and men's health. So Zane's going to join us.
Oh,
Hey there.
get my framing right. Using my bespoke candle to try and
There
hold
you
my
go.
phone.
I'm using my bespoke window. Hi, DJ Zane. How are you, sir? It's really nice to see you.
I'm doing great. Let me know if you can still hear me if I just rest it like that. Do I sound okay?
You sound good. I can hear you really well. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm doing good. Thanks for asking. How are you?
I'm mixed. Reentry is a strange time for psychiatrists, but I'm okay. I'm thankful it's Friday. I'm thankful to be speaking with you.
Yeah.
I've been looking into a little bit about, I guess, your career and your perspective on mental health, and I just want to welcome you to Friday Sessions, and thank you everybody who is tuning in and dedicating a little time for us to think about mental health, men's mental health, and in particularly creativity and artists and mental health. And so Zane, first, where are we getting you, sir? And tell us just maybe let everybody a little bit know about you. I think everybody knows who you are, but
I mean, I never assumed that, ever in life, even when I'm doing something that's kind of on a camera or on a microphone, I always sort of feel like, it's funny, it's interesting to be in the receiving end of a conversation in a different way, and I've gotten used to it. But for the longest time, I could never be the one being asked questions. I found it really disconcerting because I felt like that was sort of like my role was to try to help others to tell their truth, and I wasn't quite sure what my truth was. So it's nice to actually be a part of a conversation like this. It sort of like reminds me that I've kind of learned how to do it, and I look forward to it. I may not have even accepted this like 5 or 6 years ago, but yeah, I'm good. I'm in California with my family.
Well, Zane, thank you for that. I didn't exactly think about that, and maybe I should just introduce you, but I appreciate that, and I'd love to talk to you about what you've understood about what your truth is over the last 5 or 6 years, and I'm so thankful that you've joined us because from what I've come to understand, you've done something that so many people do and love, really be intensely interested and curious about music and about creativity, and you've turned that into a global influence, and so it's really a treat to have you here with us.
Thank you. I mean, I love music, and I think if anyone's watching this, as much as they're interested in and curious about this kind of ongoing conversation around mental health and around how we support one another, and we sort of develop this new era of what I guess could only be called like emotional intelligence, then I'm assuming people here also love music. So, it sounds like it's a good meeting room. It's a good common ground to meet and talk. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think for the longest time, I leaned into music as a fan initially and remained that way. But the conversation has definitely opened up for me in recent years, partly because through my own discoveries and what I've kind of figured out as I've kind of gone through my own journey, but also because I think that the tool that we're using right now to communicate through, and all that it brings, all of the opportunity, but also all of the insatiable appetite and the necessity to kind of never be too far away from communication, has opened up a deeper sense of communication within the artistic community. It's less controlled, self-controlled and controlled by others, and it's more transparent. Which, if you're in the conversation space, if you're curious and you don't recognize the shift, then you're not open. You're not listening. And I definitely recognize the shift. After a minute, I was like, okay, artists want to talk. They want to talk about other things than just the process.
Yeah, it's been so interesting as a psychiatrist to see this opening up of a conversation about our inner worlds, about our perceptions of each other, the things that happens to the mind, no matter whether you have a a hit record and a bazillion followers, that internal emotional process. And I do think the conversation is open like it never has before. Uh, I'm curious a little,
Well,
both.
I
I'm
think that
curious
those,
both about your mental health, but also your. Sorry for the little glitch there, and also what you've learned from all the artists you've spoken to, and and I just wonder if you think there's something about artist mental health, one that's sort of different from people who describe themselves as not artists, or is there something that artists tap into that we all have, um, that we need to develop?
that's a great question. I think, well, one of the common things I've learned is that, art really is a means of expression, um, that you can't really put into words, and often you can't find a way to conventionally express or discuss. And so people choose the medium to uncover these things. And I used to think that was a conscious decision. I've learned as I've done this over a long period of time that more often than not, it's very subconscious. And that, the artist is really, when it really connects, it's almost, it's lots of words get used to describe it: magic, spiritual, subconscious, transcendent, transcendental. It's a very sort of I think the ambition is to get to that place where it's unconscious as much as possible, and that's really where the true authentic expression exists. Obviously, you can't turn that on and off. All you can do is be open to it, and so I think that by its very nature, untangles knots. Where I think those knots get tangled up again is that, in doing so, you create a really unique and powerful bond between your art and yourself and what your art represents, that identity, and us as fans. And that bond ultimately leads to, the fan experience. And if you get enough fans, you become a business. You become a business. It becomes, a whole other thing. And the construct starts to take shape around you.
It becomes more conscious, right? You're thinking,
Yes.
and that idea of conscious do you see artists go through this,
Yes.
the thinking and getting a lot of conscious opinions about what their
Yes.
art is and should be, versus what you're speaking about, the art, maybe the music you see that appeals most to you, is when there's a kind of, the artist is a conduit of this unconscious process.
Yes. And it's interesting. For me, it's an interesting position to be in because I'm part of the analysis experience. Like, I like to talk about the process and the experience of creating art. It's something that's always driven me, I think, because I've made music and produced music on and off throughout my life. I love being in that room. But somewhere along the line, I also developed this interest in talking about that experience, not just making it, which is, I suppose, where I sort of stand in this kind of 1 foot on the dock, 1 foot on the boat kind of thing. And so, I think what I've learned, what I continue to try to remind myself is that as much as I'm trying to create an environment for people to learn about music and learn about art, I'm also I also have to try to preserve a little bit of that experience that the artist goes through initially to create it, and not just throw more pressure on top. This expectation, this analysis, this thinking process, which, as you put it, really comes into play when you start to achieve your goals and ambitions. That's really what comes with success. That's the trade. All of a sudden you have fans and you have the opportunity to make a life for yourself, but with that comes the expectations that more often than not actually draw you further away from what got you there in the first place. It's an interesting tug of war.
Yeah,
And I think
I
that's what
have
we're
this
seeing with
question.
artists now.
I have this question written right here, right in front of me. It says, why does success lead to depression in artists? And I was thinking about a few artists I've spoken to. I spoke to 2 Feet, was one of the early guests on the show, and he talked about having like the most downloaded music song ever
Right.
and being in the most severe depression of his life. I've experienced that when you release what projects I've really, there's a lull, but a lot of people really, when success comes, they get into a significant depression.
Yeah. Well, think about it. I mean, when success comes, what's your initial instinct? What do? It creates fear, because there's this fear of like, what if I don't have it tomorrow? What if I lose it? I got it now. I have to hold on to it. That by its very nature is the antithesis of letting go, which I'm sure you have in many ways, shapes, and forms encouraged people to try to do at various points when it's been too close. Everything's too close. There's not enough space. It's like, okay, let go of a few things. Just try to let go of some of these old habitual thinkings and things like that. And that's not really conducive to success. Success is like, once you've got it, don't let it go. And so then the work ethic kicks in, the pressure kicks in, and really the desire to control what is ultimately out of your control. You know, when you make music or you make art or you do anything, you can't control how people are going to perceive it, nor should you ever make it for that reason.
I I have a little pivot question, I guess, which is about another type of, I guess I'd consider art project. Maybe that sounds strange, a creative project.
Sure.
I believe you have kids, and I guess I'm wondering a little bit about that process and what you just said about control as it applies to parenting. So I
Mm.
agree, the more we try and control things, the more that you know, the more that it causes us trouble. But at the same time, as a parent, I find that a real hard conundrum, you know, thinking
Oh,
about
wow.
stuff, I don't know, like,
It's the hardest. It's the hardest. That's the walk it, talk it moment right there. You know, sometimes I actually sort of, it's not lost on me that there are times I try to sort of get into this place of, within conversations of people I don't know that well, but whose music I love, and we find this space where the conversation goes deep, and we end up having these great realizations. And then I ask myself, like, wow, do you bring those realizations with you? Like, you know, how are you applying those as a parent? And you know, you fall into those traps as a parent that you don't want to, but you do because you love someone so much that it's hard not to try to sort of control every outcome. Or to protect, and in every situation it's very tough. And really that's really at the root of anxiety of parenthood, really, is that you know, never have you wanted to control situations so much, and yet we all know what the definition of anxiety is, right? Which is the inability to control, the desire to, but inability to ultimately control, which is why it exists primarily in the past and in the future, because both of those are ultimately out of our control. And so it's this thing with, as a parent, where it's just like, that's the great tough. It's tough. And I talk to some parents who have a good grasp on it, and you know, it's pretty impressive the way that they're able to navigate that. I'm getting better at it, but it's tough.
well, I think we're always all trying to get better. One of the things that struck me as a parent is how it's sort of each step is different, because just as you feel like, yeah, I've got this little infant thing, okay, it's like, well, you don't have an infant anymore. Now you have a little toddler, and it's like, oh, as soon as you
Well,
get that, it
ages,
just
and then you have teenagers, and then, I mean, we're very lucky. Our boys are, I mean, you know, you hope as a parent you get to say this. You know, our boys are brilliant and wonderful kids, and they're our friends, and we're their parents, and we don't blur the line. We know we have to, you know, be parents and guide and ultimately teach and point in the right direction. But we, by friends, I mean, we love their company. I mean, they're incredibly fun people to hang around with, funny and
that now that's a real gift as I think a parent. I think when we think about evolving and growing with our kids, do you have a couple of things that you feel help promote that between you and your children?
yeah. The Simpsons was good. I mean, everything you sort of want to kind of, you know, on a humor level, you know, The Simpsons was a really good kind of, was a really good sort of meeting spot for us, because, you know, it's just it's got a, for the most part, you know, it's, I don't know, I always felt like it's the humor was on the right side of, adult and childlike at times. So, but I mean, that's just off the cuff remark. I mean, I think, you know, for me, music obviously plays a significant role, and I never push them in that direction, but they both love it. They both have a natural inclination towards it. And also having an incredible mom, and my wife is just, you know, a wonderful person. Like, she is really you know, she's the North Star around which we all kind of dance, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting how family so often, my family is the same way, you know. It's really it gives you a deep, I think, appreciation of the changes that are happening in terms of the patriarchy and misogyny, and how like that really doesn't, for all of it, you know, make any sense. If you're
Well, we're also, it doesn't, but we're also a really interesting family because, you know, my wife and I were born and raised in New Zealand. There's a very specific kind of humor that you have when you're raised in New Zealand. You know, it's a very um, self-differential, but also we have no problem, you know, mocking each other in a playful sense. You know what I mean? We like to mock the situation, not take things too seriously. You know, if it's there to be ridiculed in a loving way, then chances are someone will. It's kind of at the core of the humor. And then our kids were born in Britain, and they have a very dry sense of humor just from their growing up, you know, for quite a significantly important moment in their early formative years. And so there's just a lot of like playful ribbing that goes on in our family. Like, you know, you can be on the receiving end at any given time of three really sharp sort of humor, and once they form as a triangle, if it's your turn, then you just got to kind of run with it, you know. So it just keeps things really interesting in our house, because you just never know when you're going to be in the spotlight. And when someone goes for it and they land one, everyone just galvanizes in. It's fun, you know. It's funny.
That sounds like a very fun family process.
Go with it, you know.
I'm curious about how you've managed your mental health. I mean, you've gone from, as I understand, being a very popular DJ and really helping people appreciate music and sharing music. And now with your work with Apple, you're really shaping tastes. It seems like a lot of pressure.
Right.
And I'm wondering, for whatever you feel comfortable sharing about your own mental health.
Sure.
And how you've managed
That's
that.
I'm, you know, absolutely. Look, you know, the pressure, I never feel pressure when it comes to music. Like I never felt the pressure of finding records or quote unquote breaking records or any of that stuff. I think in the beginning, when I joined the BBC, there was an initial fear, because I was like, I don't know how this process works. What if my taste abandons me and I'm not able to like pick anything that's good? And, you know, but that went away really fast, because I had an amazing team, and the BBC is very good at instilling confidence in you. And at least it was for me. And I had a great era there. So when it comes to the actual process of finding, playing, sharing, talking about music, I don't feel any pressure there. That's just pure joy for me. It really is. It's really just, that's something that I struggle to even call a job, because it's just, for me, it's like a passion that found form, if that makes sense. Where the pressure comes in, I think, is that kind of hybrid of, you know, what you carry with you in your life and where you want to go in your life, and how much you're willing to lean into work or lean into other things in order to prop up your identity. And what I've really learned in the last couple, you know, 3 or 4 years in particular, was I started to sort of take a step back from the life I had actually built for myself, and I started to do a bit of an audit and started to figure out, like, what are the things that are really important? Like, if this is the second half of my life, God willing, then what are the things that are really important to me, and what are the things that I could probably do away with, I could probably let go of. And that's an ongoing thing, but that's been some pretty consistent work, and it's involved therapy, and it's involved getting my health right, and it's involved yoga, which I understand it probably comes with a caveat of like eye roll, but I swear by yoga. I mean, I love it because of the breath.
That came to you later in life, yoga?
I tried it a few times and didn't really connect, so I wasn't ready for it. I wasn't willing to breathe. I could do the physical things, but I was like, I'm not getting the benefits here. And it's because I hadn't learned about the breathing, really. And the breathing is the thing. Like, that's the thing. Like, I did it for
breathing's the thing. I mean, that's just, yes, of all of the techniques, if that's isn't with you, it's kind of, it's there's not a lot we can do.
If you're not breathing, it's a weird stretching experience. And so for me, it was like, you know, and that's what I was lacking. I was really lacking. I mean, you asked me the question, so I'll get a little indulgent. I was lacking the presence to know how I was moving at any given time with my breath, with my body. I was harboring a lot of stress within my body. I wasn't leaving it. I was just storing it. My body was doing this incredible job of just carrying it. And I'd always say, like, I have weird aches and pains, and I don't know why this hurts, and I don't know why that hurts, and I don't know why I'm always having some kind of ache, and I don't know why I never feel entirely healthy, and I don't know. And I was asking, you know, I was saying I don't know, but I wasn't really asking myself why. And then I sort of
by the way, when I hear patients say that, it's one of my favorite things, is everyone says it. And it's being a psychiatrist or a therapist, you hear this. People say, you know, I don't know. I don't know. And then they say, as you just did, like, oh, I was holding all the tension in my body and I wasn't paying attention. I wasn't breathing. It's like, people are so brilliant. Like, you knew exactly why you weren't feeling well.
Well, we're also very good at distracting ourselves away from asking ourselves those questions. Like we're able to acknowledge them, but then we move on to the next glass of wine or the next work we're going to do or the next thing or the next distraction or whatever it is we do with varying scales of mild to severe. And so that's kind of the human experience a lot of the time, right? And it's understandable. There's no judgment there. I mean, we're constantly being bombarded by stuff. I mean, it's an exciting time to be alive. There is stimuli everywhere, but if we're not figuring out how much we want to actually carry and how much we want to do away with, then we're not ultimately in control of our own life. We're kind of just taking and taking and taking and taking. It's like walking into a banquet and seeing all the food on the table. You've got to decide what's going to go on the plate. You have to decide what your meal's actually going to be, right?
It's the hardest thing. I remember banquets for me growing up a little bit with some food insecurity, but just a little bit poor. That you see that banquet, and initially, it's hard not to put it all on the plate.
You want it on the plate.
And just go and just kind of get to try everything and eat everything. It's really,
and that's, but
it's a,
and yeah, sorry, I was just cutting it out there. I wasn't sure whether you stopped or not. But and that's, by the way, that's totally great. Like that's a very human thing to want to do.
initially,
hear me, by the way?
it ends up not.
Yeah,
I think it ends up not being great. I think it ends up
it's not.
with.
That's going to be. It's not great ongoing. Like allow yourself the experience. Curiosity is a wonderful part of being human. I was talking to somebody, a really brilliant artist, about this morning, and I was talking about how he has built himself. I'll just tell you, I'm sure it's fine. I was talking to Pharrell about this, and I was saying how he's built himself a full-service curiosity world. Like he is just constantly drawing things that he's ultimately curious about and building this wonderful experience, not just for himself, but for others, that involves activism and social work and education and food and good times and music and art and clothes and skincare and like full service curiosity, right? And that's what comes from trying the banquet for the first time and figuring out and then going, okay, cool. Now, what do I really need and what serves me? And so getting back to the
Well,
original question, like that's really where I got to was like, okay, what is going to serve me here? And what served me was just slow down, learn how to breathe, just go back to the basics, learn how to breathe, put some goodness into your body and figure out a balance that actually makes sense for you and your family.
yeah, I think it's also for daddies your age. It's such a I call it it's such a challenging time where you have kids, you have a relationship that's hitting a stride, but you also often have a professional career
Right.
that's hitting an incredible stride, and it's very hard to stay with the breath and stay mindful and open, and not burn out on the grind a little bit.
But
Uh,
the opposite is just frantic, and you get used to frantic, and you get used to running around doing things, and then sometimes you forget even like what you've achieved in a day because you're just running from one thing to the next. And that doesn't mean that's not even a byproduct of some level of achievement or some scale or anything else. That's just every day for everybody. Everyone's figuring
what
things.
caused that? What caused that? I'm sorry to interrupt, but what caused that pivot for you? Because I mean, I'm sure I don't know what a DJ life is like. I mean, I fantasize it's a lot of late nights and a lot of sweat and
You kind
pounding music and sounds amazing. And then in the DJ booth, at BBC all day long. I mean, it sound and so I think you had a lot of what pivoted for you that you went from frantic to, it sounds like more curious, creative flow state with a lot of breath work and a lot of yoga.
I just wasn't um I wasn't feeling my best. I mean, I realized like doing my best work at any given time is not what it's about. Um, and it wasn't translating into physical and mental joy for me. And it was becoming this thing that was like, I have to achieve. I have to go out and I have to work as much as I can every waking minute, and I have to get as many wins up every day as I can. And but now I'd go to sleep and my brain would ache, my body would ache, I wouldn't be able to sleep. I would wake up, I'd drink coffee to get going. It was this really weird lifestyle. And I just assumed that's me. And then I'd be like aches. And I was realizing that I was living with these pains, just living with them. Oh, well, that's just life.
Right, right. It's pain. It's because you're going so far. Did you? I'm a nutritional psychiatrist. I'm curious. With the changes, did you change also how you ate?
Yeah, I mean, my eating has been a strange thing for me because I think early on in life, I started working strange hours, working evenings and things like that. So I would eat late and da 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 da. And so I've never been nutritionally. I'm no poster child for nutrition. It's
Eat late is like fast food, like
yeah. I mean, on the road for sure, all that stuff, and just not healthy. And I think so. Yeah, definitely more health and all that stuff. But I wouldn't, that might be another step in the right direction for me, is to figure out. I'm probably overdue going through my diet and figuring out how that actually helps. But I'm still in this process. I mean, I definitely just started to focus on my own health a little more and a little less on all of the things that were just driving me all the time. And what I also learned was the work didn't suffer. In fact, in many cases, it got better. I actually felt like I was enjoying it more, which I am. I'm having a great time in what I do. I started making music again. I started feeling creative again. All these things start happen again. Um, and so really, I mean, the takeaway from that for me, if anyone is sort of still listening to me, I think, it's just listen. It's just try to find some space to just listen to yourself, and not just to the things that are swirling around you all the time, or the people around you, or the voices, or all of the you know distractions that we naturally lean towards. Like, just give yourself a moment to really listen to what your body is telling you, and ask yourself, like, could I feel better? Could I feel better physically? Could I feel better mentally? Could I breathe deeper? Could I experience things in a richer way? And if the answer is yes, then that's beautiful. Like, that is like, wow, that is the biggest step that I could have taken and you could take, I think, is to actually have the presence and the awareness. Awareness is a big thing for me right now. Not just self-awareness, of course, but awareness, greater awareness. I mean, I think if we're not coming out of the last 18 months with a greater awareness and a desire to make good, then we're missing the point. And
maybe we
so
didn't pay attention to what the universe was telling us.
100%. And I love that talk about the universe. I know much has been made of it. Many books have been written, and there's definitely going to be people who feel that the universe is too much of a abstract concept to put your life in the hands of. But I truly believe that there's just too much beauty around for energy to not be real. And so, I feel it. And I've played records in a radio studio with two people in there underground in a soundproof room with no windows, and I felt the record connect. And so the next day when someone said, wow, that broke all records on, feedback on the station last night and it was out of control, I'm like, I know it did. I felt it. I knew it was working out there. I knew people felt it. That's that's just one example. So I love all that talk about the universe, and I think in order to truly connect to it, you have to really find yourself. So such an obvious thing to say, but it's not. It's something I think we take for granted, is ourselves. And it's true what they say. In order to be kind to others, start being kind to yourself.
Since we're talking sort of big idea here, is music the gift to us from the universe? I mean, I've been wondering where music comes from. I'm always blown away because I'm sort of an old person, so I just kind of listen to a lot of classics but now with these kids and with a minivan and Spotify, I've got all this new music being played for me. I found Taylor
Right.
Swift, which really a lot of tears there. Um, Lots of great music, and so besides that, I'm wondering where you think music comes from, and uh, uh, yeah.
Deep spiritual experience. Two of my heroes that I spoke to the other day, Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, two of the greatest artists, um, whisperers, producers, songwriters, speak the language better than almost anybody I've ever become a fan of. Um, Called it, a spiritual gift. It's one of the most spiritual gifts that we have. It because you know, and I've heard this over and over again. I sort of touched on it before. The moment I think where it's truly magic is where You know, an artist realizes that ultimately they are just a vessel for whatever is coming through them. And some people, of course, will credit that to God, and some people will credit that to magic or a different form of spirituality. As I said before, transcendental situation or a subconsciousness. And that's not to say that that's the only music that matters. We know that some of the greatest albums of all time were hard earned, you know, but it's got to come from somewhere. And, and, and I don't believe that it's,
I think everyone else can hear you. Everyone can't hear Zane. Well, then the interview's no good if we can't hear Zane. Well, we'll find it back, everybody. Can folks hear me okay, or you can't hear me or Zane? Oh, hi, everybody. It looks like we lost Zane's sound. I'm Dr. Drew Ramsey. Wow, this is a wonderful conversation. I think Zane's going to come right back. Let me know if you can hear me, and let's get him back here. Maybe the universe just absorbed Zane, and we'll hear him later. Here he goes. All right.
I'm back. Sorry about
All right.
that.
That's okay. That's all right. I was just
I got a
thinking
phone.
we were talking too big, and the universe just uploaded you.
No, I got an incoming phone call, and I think it just jogged me out, and I couldn't hear you. I'm not sure where you lost me, but I was just saying that I think that by the very nature of finding a way to complete something, and knowing when it ends, you know, it kind of ultimately proves that you're not entirely sure where it starts. You know.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's I have an artist that works in my company, and I remember talking with her about the creative process, and it was so helpful to me to frame it the way that you just did. That if you think of yourself as a vessel, or as a lens, or as a something through which the energy is being organized into, maybe it's, you know, whatever it is for you, you know, if it's music, if it's love, if it's art, like that and for me it was such a helpful perspective, because the only control I have is to work on the lens. I can't, you know, I can't control kind of the energy that's coming to it. And it really helped me understand, I guess, both my process, but also liberate something, not all, I think, but something. Um, Zayn, I'm wondering, uh-oh, are we frozen here? Oh boy, there we go. Oh boy, hey everybody. So we lost Zane, and I'm gonna. Oh,
Sorry about that. I'm going into where the Wi-Fi is good. I was trying to do it all like in nature and stuff, but I think I've just got to bite the bullet and
it's
just
okay.
come to where the router is.
Yeah, I know that feeling. I've done a lot of these from my farm in rural Indiana, and it's always a little. But don't
No
worry
deal.
about it. We're a mental health session, so we're friendly, and everybody. Zane's getting to his Wi-Fi. I am on with Zane Lowe, who DJ Zane, as you know, was a major was the DJ on BBC One, and then has moved over as head of Apple's. He's the creative director, I think, global creative director of music is, and we're talking about creativity and the universe and mental health. And I'm not, Zane, I can hear you, but I don't think that I can
You
see
lost me again?
you. But I'm not sure whether that's me
Can
or that's everybody else. So um, folks, let us know if you can see Zane. I think I can hear you, Zane. So let's just continue, and maybe the video will catch up if that's okay. And we'll probably
Sure.
should take this as a universe that our time, unfortunately, is almost up. But
Well,
I
let's
wanted to
keep
have a
going.
couple of questions as we're speaking about music, and I think the spiritual importance of music. I've gone through periods of my life when I guess, more down, and I haven't been able to fill my life with music. And I'm wondering what you have so much music in your life. I mean, when I think about I mean, we're about the same age. When I think about the number, I've spent, I don't know, all of my professional hours listening to people, and you've spent, and you have too, but have been listening to music. Your brain must be filled with so much music. How do you structure that for yourself? And particularly, what are some things that you could do to help us all get more diverse music in our life?
Well, it's just, I mean, it's like anything. You have to just be, you have to want to welcome it into your life. You have to want it in your life. You have to want to discover new things. It's like, if it's an interesting question, because often I'll talk to some people and they'll be like, oh, I haven't listened to anything new for so long.
Yeah,
And I think
yeah,
they expect
that thing.
I think they expect me to judge them, because it's my job, and to go, what, are you crazy? I go, cool. What are you listening to though? And they're like, oh, and because it's like, it's entirely your listening to music. It needs to come from a desire for it to a place where you want it to embellish your life and to be a part of your everyday experience. It shouldn't be like a I feel bad scenario, or the kind of thing that you wear on a t-shirt, like nothing great was made after 1992. Like, you should never have to feel that that's a statement you need to make. Like, it's just about, don't overthink it. Don't make a conscious decision. Just press play on something, and how does it make you feel? Don't It doesn't make you feel something, well, you move on to the next thing. But it's all about your desire to feel something, and music really is there to make us feel. We put a lot of emphasis on statistics.
Hmm.
We put a lot of emphasis on social media now. We put a lot of emphasis on success via followers and all these things that matter. They add up to a career. I get it. But at the very, very core of what turns us on in the first place is about feeling. That's the thing about this new thing on Apple Music, which we're talking about, which is spatial audio. And some people are like, oh, it's a tool, it's a this, it's a gimmick, it's not. It's there to make you feel something. It's there to change your feeling about music. And
I
I
mean, your brain experiences it differently, and it's been one of the as we've shifted over to all my work used to be in person, very small curated office, very I don't know, sparse place, and now I'm in a Zoom cage, right? But the brain, how it processes, how my patients and I process them
Right.
is different. The idea that the sound could be, I was looking at that more all around, it would be so much better for the brain because that's how we're used to getting it.
Like, I'm buying vinyl again. I mean, I love streaming, don't get me wrong, and I use it all the time. But I also like have on and off collected vinyl my whole life. And the only thing that really is a prerequisite, or a thing that makes me want to buy a record is, am I going to get that feeling from it? Like, it's not about whether it has a hit on it or any of that stuff. It's like, okay, so I could play Etta James, I could play the Smiths, the Pixies, there's Nils Fromm, Knowledge, Outkast, White Stripes, all of these records, Soundgarden, Monk, Pumpkins, all these records, right? These are all there because they give me I get an emotional reaction from them. I feel something, I put them on, and when I put them on, I love them.
Well,
And
will you walk us a little through your listening process? Is this something that you wake up and do, or you have time in your calendar where you're going to go listen to records? How do you? Is there a feeling you get where, like, you're thirsty and you need to go put on the Smiths, or how does it? How do you do it?
I just I love music, so I wake up in the morning and I put on a record, or I put on Apple Music, and then when it's time to listen to something, because it's part of what I'm going to do that day, um, I put it on and I open my ears to it. And then in a weird way, I'm a vessel. I don't know what I'm going to think in that moment. I have no idea how that music's going to make me feel. I have no idea what thoughts are going to come to mind, or questions are going to emerge, or how I'm going to structure a conversation. I mean, that's the mad thing about it, is over time, I've actually learned to not prepare. There are very few times that I go in there with a deep preparation for interviews. I still do it, but I do it a different way. I listen, and I absorb, and I just kind of try and open my mind as much as possible to whatever is coming. And then I listen to what the person's telling me, and I look for key directions in their answers so that I can just create a conversation, much like we're doing right now. I mean, you're doing it right now. You're literally just pivoting according to what we're talking about. In a way, that's a vessel for curiosity in itself, right? You don't know before I say something whether or not it's worth focusing on.
Yeah, it doesn't even really. Yeah, I'm not sure how that works. Now that you're pointing it out, it doesn't work. So let me think of my. I wanted
But
to
that's
ask
the
you about that.
beauty of it. That's the
I
beauty of
was
it.
thinking. I was
It's all
thinking about
magic.
you as a sorry, Zane. I was thinking about you as a listener because I was thinking so often as we're swiping through or tapping through our digital, stuff, right? We're just kind of like, wondering whether we like it or not.
Right.
It's a very binary thing. Like, yeah, I like this, I don't like this. And to me, it sounds like you really sit in this process. In Friday sessions, Dr. Greg Scott Brown and I, we have this kind of like curiosity before judgment is sort of our mantra. And it feels like you really sit in that, where you're curious. Like if you don't like it so much, it sounds like you sit with it and wonder what the artist is doing, what's going on, why it's evoking that. And how long do you sit with a song before you kind of make an assessment of it?
Oh, that depends. I mean, sometimes it's 30 seconds and you're in, and other times it could take you 3 years to truly appreciate something that you've come back to, or you hear it in a different context. I mean, I think we don't put enough emphasis on the context or the environment in which we hear things either. And I think a lot of times that's the thing that frustrates me sometimes about traditional recording studios. I don't find them ultimately very inspiring feeling places. A lot of times they're windowless, they're dark. It's like this whole, I'm like, why would you feel something in here? It's crazy to me.
So
And
we
that's the
can
same.
focus.
Yeah, well, that's it, right? But again, it's like, okay, focus is important when it comes to certain parts of the process. No question. Engineering, mixing, there are true masters who ultimately know how to focus on certain things to get greatness out of. But the creative process can happen anywhere. And that's part of the revolution, which I absolutely love, is the fact that now, with the way that music gets created, distributed, and ultimately, amplified through social media, it's so in the hands of the artist that the longer you can hold on to that truth, to that purity, the better. And so, I that definitely influences the way I listen to music now. Is I don't. I used to listen to it when I had this kind of appointment to listen on Radio One, and it was like I had the records before anybody else, and the whole thing was like, I'll play them for a few weeks, and then you release them, and then we'll do it again and again and again and again, and it was great, and that's how radio worked. But now it's like if it's not on a streaming service, and it's not finding its audience, and it's not building up its the love. Like, what's the point in playing something that's not out? Like, let the audience have it. So we all have to have it at the same time. So that ultimately changes the way I feel about music and listen to it, because I'm listening to it now ultimately as a fan. I am looking for feedback from fans. And so that whole idea of like curator or whatever is really changed. It's like the music belongs to everybody, and it's not really when you play it, it's how you play it. And so what I'm looking to do is to use what I love about music and what I've learned to play records a certain way to turn people on, to get them excited about it, to make them feel that thing. When I played the Salt record the other day, which is blindingly good again, um, it's just like the words come out because I'm feeling it in the moment. I'm like, this is just blowing my mind. So let me try to be as honest about it in the moment on the air as I can be. Because that to me is like the most human experience that I can sort of try to facilitate.
Well, I mean, Zane, it strikes me that you dish out a lot of good medicine along the airwaves, and your positive vibrations are just heard by billions of people. So from the mental health community, I thank you for that. And as a music lover, it's just wonderful what you do for all of us. Everyone, I'm talking to Zane Lowe, and we're going to run out of time here in a little bit, but. Zane, and I'd love to continue the conversation sometime because I'm really curious how music and how these new distribution platforms can get used to promote better mental health. And I just wanted to I
Mm.
guess end on a note. Mental health problems. It's felt, some people feel, I'm not sure I feel, but that there's more mental health concerns within the artistic community. Sometimes people think, oh, it's bipolar disorder in a certain way, that people get into these expansive creative states and then they cycle through depression. There's certainly all of the pressure. There's certainly a lot of substance abuse and loss to suicide. And and I'm wondering if you were in charge, and maybe you are in charge. What do you think can be done to improve artist mental health?
Ooh,
both in
that's a
our
good
understanding of it
question. That's a
and
good
not
question.
losing artists.
That's a great question. I mean, first of all, I'm not in charge, nor would I want to be or should be, nor should anybody. What is ultimately most important is that we listen to the artists and to each other, and we start to change the way we move as a species. Ultimately, um, you know, change happens from inside. True change happens from inside the conversation, and it becomes wider and wider and spreads further and further. Very hard to get inside the conversation from outside. You've got to go to where the core of it really matters, and the people who truly have the most to say, and are the most courageous to want to actually change things. And that's across the board. Then we all get swept up, hopefully, in this momentum, and we become more aware. I think we're at a point now where we have enough people, well, we certainly have a good start of people who want to talk about, you know, the concept of mental health within the artistic community and across the board, by the way. I mean, look, no one is, I don't go into this going like it's all about mental health within the artist community. Like, you know, my mental health isn't directly related to art. And a lot of my friends who I have these kind of conversations with are in completely different professions and jobs, or not. And so, you know, I think but I think to be specific to your question, and given that I work in the entertainment business, byproduct of being a fan, I think we have to ultimately provide more support for artists to be able to build a life for themselves, and the tools to be able to create balance for themselves, so that it's not this constant energy around creation and content and attention and this high frequency, like you got to fill it, and the barrel never gets full. And so that to me is like something that I think we all have to be aware of, and also just listen, just be open. I still get kind of frustrated when an artist will come out and say, look, I'm burnt out, and there's this kind of part of this conversation still kind of rises to the surface, which is like, you know, well, you should be grateful, you're living out your dream, you have millions of dollars, and you have this and you have that. And no one's denying that success is a privilege, but it shouldn't be that it's ultimately connected to your state of well-being.
But in some ways, there's also a denial that happens in burnout, right? Because of all of these things, your fame and privilege and wealth, that means you shouldn't feel burnout or have mental health problems or struggle with
Right.
substance use or be
This is what
depressed or
you asked
feel
for. This is
awful.
what you wanted. This was your
Right,
dream. This is what you wanted. And it's like, okay, yeah, it is. But it doesn't mean that I'm not learning about it in real time either. Not me, but the artist in general.
right.
It's not that you get over the finish line and all of a sudden it's like, just shut up and be happy. First of all, there is no finish line. And second of all, if we can't expect artists to pivot and change the way that they move, and not just artists, athletes, I mean, you've seen what just happened, you know, in the tennis industry. You know, and it's funny because not to, you know, I'll get into this for a second because I went on social media about it. And I said, you know, just to me, it's frustrating. Ultimately, we're coming out of Mental Health Awareness Month, and yet, you know, there's a lot of judgment and quite significantly aggressive judgment being leveled at a professional athlete for saying that, hey, listen, I need to change my position a bit in order to preserve my ability to perform and to actually be well, right? And the most common comment I got back was, well, but it's a contract dispute. It's not about mental health. It's a contract dispute. And if we're ultimately putting contracts, and that's the right reaction, Doc. If we're ultimately putting contracts above somebody's you know, ability to raise their voice in the moment and say, hey, I need to change my position right here, and if you respect me and you respect what I bring to the game, you'll help me do that. And it's like, no, you're under contract. Well, that by its very nature is a mental health thing. Is like we've created a contract situation here. You have to honor that above all costs. What? Above all costs?
Well, I
Like,
mean, we have a long
really?
history in America of having absurd contracts that causes women, particularly Black women, to not be able to fully express themselves. And
Crazy.
so I
It's
think that
crazy. And I'm not
it's
trying to do away
it's
with the concept of you know, legal bonds. I understand contracts exist. I get it. I've signed them before. But come on, where's
You
the
know,
empathy? Where's the humanity? Where's the opportunity to look at this from a human point of view and not just from a paper with a bunch of lines on it? I don't know, man. I mean, I don't know enough
well, look,
about it really,
I'm a
but
psychiatrist, so my feeling is I don't really care if the contracts hurt people's mental health. They're bad contracts, and they should be torn up and rewritten.
I
Because as you're
agree.
talking, if we're gonna move in a new way as humans,
I agree.
we can't have systems that don't have flexibility.
I
Especially when
agree.
people say, my mental health is on the edge. I can't be questioned right now. It's going to mess me
So there you
all up.
go.
This is not what I do. What
You
I'm good at is tennis.
you just
So let me do
landed
my
a
thing.
yeah, exactly. And by the way, I still was going to perform. I was still going to play. Like that is
Right, right. I mean,
you've
I'm still going
landed
to
a really
perform.
good
My big
amendment.
obligation being a tennis star, I just need to not be scrutinized because I think it hit a core in me as a psychiatrist and as someone who's been challenged at times with my mental health. There are moments that, yeah, I'm on point. I can do whatever. But when you're not there, even if you can perform, it takes so much energy, right?
Totally.
And it doesn't feel right, and
And
it's
dog,
not
check this out.
authentic.
Check this out. This is coming from someone who talks to people for a living. Like, I would have been one of the press that she wouldn't have talked to if that was my chosen passion and I was where I am in my life now. But I've had situations where interviews haven't seen the light of day. And I'm not going to tell you what they are because that would completely defeat the purpose of protecting protecting that situation. But I've had situations where artists have gone, I don't know how I feel about this right now. Okay.
Right, and I
And,
mean
and for me to go ahead and put that interview out at all costs, I would be keeping them to a quote unquote contract. And I don't believe in that. My thing
well,
is like,
you wouldn't
if,
be respecting the sanctity of the conversation in terms of, I mean,
correct.
it's one of the things that I love about my job is it feels like one of the last few places that nobody ever brings out their phone. Actually, people make sure like the battery's out, right? It's a soundproof room, and what gets said is never going to show up anywhere. And it's like, I don't know, it feels to me like such a privilege to be in that authentic conversation where, there isn't a concern about anything other than someone's mental health and inner
But
process.
you stumbled, I don't want to let that moment slide, where you stumbled across something before, which you said, how do we make changes? Well, you just made one. Maybe we need to, if we really truly care about the idea of emotional intelligence, then we need to start factoring into our contracts these abilities for people to be able to for us to be conscious of that fact. And
Well, mental health is, in contrast, it's a failure. It's like, if you have a mental health problem, boy, you're a failure, right? If you can't perform your duty, I mean, think about the mental health questions you get at work. Like, do you have some bad mental health problems going to keep you from doing your job? Because if so, you need to tell us right now. I mean, that's horrible. There's not any like, hey, is there some way that we can support you, or is there something that it's really. It shows you, as we're talking about trying to deconstruct a lot of things about our society, it shows you where there's a systemic bias against mental health problems, and about the really radical and hard truth is that, unlike the statistics that 1 in 5 people have a mental illness, that 5 out of 5 people, whether it's wonderful global DJs or incredible artists or psychiatrists, right? 5 out of 5 of us have human brains. They're a little tricky. They're hard to take care of,
yep.
and the more that we can breathe with them and breathe and connect, the better. Then usually at the end, I ask people if they have any advice, but I had and I'd love if you want to have, because I think some people watching, someone might be having a little mental health issue. You might be inspired by your words, or certainly could be, but I thought you might
I
want to
lost you
lead
there for a
us.
second. I lost you there for a second. Sorry,
Oh,
man. You got to rewind because I reached. Here you go. This is a good insight. I reached my time limit on Instagram today. So there you go. That's an indication about how I present my mental health. Is I have a time limit, and we just used it, so I had to ignore my time limit to maintain this conversation. So there you go.
I appreciate you. That's a sign from the universe that it's time for you to go play with your kids or hug your wife or get some creative music flowing. But I was kind of wondering if you had specific advice for anyone who might be struggling now, and then I was wondering if you might end by just leading us in a little breathing exercises for a breath or two to help everyone who's watching learn how you use breath.
I can't. I mean, it's not that I wouldn't want to. I do anything like that, but I don't do that. I don't do breathing exercises like that yet. And that's. I'll always be truthful with you. I'm not going to sit here and take you through 10 short breaths and 10 deep breaths because it's not an exercise that I do. And I want to. And it's funny because my mum would always tell me, you don't breathe properly. You know, you don't breathe
Really?
properly. You don't really acknowledge your breath. You shallow breathe all the time. It's like breathing is just a way for you to get from A to B. And I never really truly understood until I started. But I will say this about breath, if this helps, is that I find myself now way more than I ever did, uncontrollably deep breathing once in a while. That I will sit down and I will just, without even realizing it, just go, and I never did that, ever. So I'm unlocking something in process that definitely for me, and the reason why I can't take you through a breathing exercise is because I'm really in the process of it. I'm figuring out that side of things.
So Zane, I'm gonna share my favorite tip with everyone. My favorite
Please.
tip is I get to teach people. I remember the first time I taught someone to breathe, I'd done a bunch of mind body medicine training, and I was sitting with someone who was a, I don't know, like powerful New Yorker, and I'm thinking, I can't believe this guy's gonna like laugh me out of the room. And the part that I focus, so I inhale through the nose. I like to, and people do this for all kinds of different seconds. I do it slowly until my lungs are full, and then I like to hold my breath for a couple beats of my heart. I like that stillness. I like that's kind of the original
Let's try
music,
that.
the original beat. And then in that stillness, I sit, usually for a few beats of my heart, 3 or 4, maybe 5. And then the exhale is the part that I think is really important and helps people where, and I teach exhalation, all kinds of ways to breathe, but the simple one for me is the exhalation through the pursed lips, where I'm creating a little bit of pressure.
Yeah, man.
And I'm really intense on focusing my mind on the air exiting my body, and then usually putting something in that for me, something psychological I'm trying to release, whether it's a feeling, a thought, a grievance, a regret, usually a fear. That I'm really trying to,
Mm.
that I'm done with, like, that's out of my body. And a lot of times I'll feel a kind of sense of almost heat leaving my body. But Zane, I
Oh,
hope
yeah.
as you're learning some breathing and exploring your inner space, I hope that's helpful to you in any way.
It's
And
very
everyone,
helpful. And one thing that I actually picked up and recently in a conversation I had with someone was that because I couldn't understand why my body was feeling a certain way, and they said to me, "What? Well, when you feel a pain or you feel a certain ache or a stiffness somewhere or something doesn't feel quite right, ask yourself rather than acknowledge the pain, ask yourself how you feel. Ask yourself what you're feeling in that moment. Are you feeling scared? Are you feeling anxious, nervous, hyper, frantic, sleep? You know, what do you sort of the physical experience? If you can tap into that as much as possible, then you might actually be closer to figuring out where to send it rather than into your body.
mm-hmm,
Figure out where to send it and process it, acknowledge it, and deal with it so that it's kind of filed, it's done, it's pushed, and it's been acknowledged. And I think where we get ourselves in trouble and where breathing really helps, because breathing ultimately unlocks a lot of that tension within the body, right? It's creating space within the body. And that's one thing I felt for a long time was I just didn't have enough space. Everything was filled up all the time. And I would reduce it by that much, and then I would fill it up with something else. And so yoga and breathing, all those things allowed me just to create space and to rejuvenate areas of my body that I could then choose what I wanted to fill it with, going from like down to like 70% full as opposed to constantly being at 85 to 90. And
mm-hmm.
I think that to me is really how I look at breathing. Is I look at it as a way of actually creating space. And I look at kind of processing my emotions in a conscious way as a way of creating space. And the more space I have, the more I'm able to, it's like I keep saying to artists and friends of mine who are sort of working. I'm like, what do you say no to? Like, what do you say no to, you know? And
It's
because
that,
no is hard. And then I said to
well,
someone the
and
other day, I was
that
like, well, you
ocean
know that,
without no, there's no boundary. With no boundary, there's no space,
well,
right?
also no allows you to say yes. When you say no to things, you say yes to the right things. When you say no to yes to everything, then you don't know what's right and what's wrong. You don't know where you're going, what direction you're going in. So the art of no really is to facilitate the objective of being able to consciously say yes to the things that you know are going to actually be of value and matter. And that's why I think no is really important. If someone says no to me, I don't want to talk to you, and they show up somewhere else, I never feel any kind of way about it because I'm like, that was a conscious decision. And they
Well,
decided.
essentially, you don't take it like there's a reason behind it, right? They're protecting space in some way that we might not know about,
Yeah.
and it might be important, likely is. Zane, thank you for such a wonderful conversation
That was a
about
pleasure.
mental health. I feel there's so much more we could talk about masculinity and artist mental health, and I hope you'll come back or we can continue the conversation somehow. And again, I just thank you from the mental health community for making the conversation, making space for the conversation, sharing with us so many of our favorite artists about what's going on in terms of their mental health. I think that is so inspiring. Professionals like myself, we can talk all day long about mental health, but when you have a Justin Bieber or Sam Mendes or Britney, speaking up, it changes the conversation in ways that we never could. So thank you for
Yeah.
being such a great ally to the mental health community, and thank you for all you're doing. And I look forward to listening to a lot more music. And everyone, thank you so much for turning into
I appreciate
Friday
you. Thanks for
sessions.
joining us.
I'm Drew Ramsey. Greg Scott Brown's going to be back next week. Greg Scott Brown, he's our yogi and psychiatrist guest. He should have interviewed you, saying you guys could have done some yoga
No, it
together.
was awesome. We should do it again. I'm looking forward to the next time already. It was great. Thanks, Doris.
And everybody, thanks for your time. Look, until next time, you know our request. Take care of your mental health. Take care of those around you. It's July 4th weekend, so please be safe. Make sure and hydrate. Make sure if you're with family and friends, do more than just have a great time. Look them in the eye. Check in. Give some hugs now that you can again. We'll be back next week. Take care of your mental health, everybody. Zane Lowe, thank you for an epic conversation, man. I look forward to the next
Yeah,
one.
me too. Thanks, Drew. Bye.
Bye.